He had been the city's most mysterious bartender for 12 years. He never talked, never smiled, just served drinks. Customers called him the ghost bartender because he silently appeared behind the bar whenever they needed a drink. But that night, when three armed men stormed into O'Malley's pub, his reaction shocked everyone. Within 25 seconds, he had neutralized all three of them using nothing but bar equipment. "Navy SEAL," whispered the manager, and in that moment, everyone realized that this silent bartender was anything but ordinary. Before we continue with this explosive story of hidden warfare expertise, tell me in the comments which city you're watching from today, and if you believe stories like this deserve to be told, hit that subscribe button. O'Malley's pub sat on the corner of 5th Street and Main Avenue, a neighborhood bar that had served the same blue-collar community for 30 years. The dimly lit establishment with its worn wooden floors and vintage beer signs attracted regulars who came for cheap drinks and quiet conversation after long work days. Behind the bar, Jake Morrison had been a fixture for 12 years. Tall, weathered, with graying hair and hands that moved with efficient precision, Jake was the kind of bartender who knew what you wanted before you asked for it. But he never engaged in small talk, never shared personal stories, and never seemed interested in the conversations flowing around him. The regulars had nicknamed him the Ghost because of his ability to appear exactly when needed and disappear just as quietly. He'd slide a beer across the bar without being asked, refill an empty glass before the customer noticed, and somehow maintain order in a place where alcohol and emotions often collided. What they didn't know was that Jake's calm under pressure came from 12 years of training that had nothing to do with bartending. November 15th started like any other Friday night. The after-work crowd had settled in, construction workers and factory employees unwinding with cold beer and mindless television. Jake worked methodically, cleaning glasses, restocking bottles, and monitoring the room with eyes that saw more than anyone realized. At 9:47 p.m., three men entered O'Malley's. They weren't regulars. They moved wrong, scanned the room wrong, and positioned themselves wrong. Jake's threat assessment training, dormant for years, immediately activated. The first man was young, nervous, constantly checking the windows. The second was older, calmer, with prison tattoos visible on his forearms. The third stayed near the door, hand inside his jacket in a way that suggested concealed weapon. Jake continued wiping down glasses, but his body had shifted into a different mode entirely. 12 years of peaceful bartending were about to end. "Everybody on the ground, now!" the older man shouted, pulling a pistol from his waistband. The second man produced a sawed-off shotgun while the third locked the front door and flipped the closed sign. 23 people in the bar, construction workers, office employees, two women celebrating a promotion, all hit the floor in terror as three armed criminals took control of their neighborhood sanctuary. But Jake didn't move. "You too, bartender," the gunman yelled. On the ground, Jake looked at him calmly. "Can't do that," he said quietly. The gunman's eyes narrowed. "What did you say?" "I said I can't do that." What happened next lasted 25 seconds but revealed 12 years of carefully hidden identity. Jake's first move was to grab the bottle opener from his belt, a heavy steel tool that became a projectile weapon in trained hands. He threw it with surgical precision, striking the shotgun-wielding man in the temple. The shotgun clattered to the floor as its owner collapsed unconscious. The lead gunman turned his pistol toward Jake, but Jake was already moving. He vaulted over the bar with fluid motion, using a bar stool as a shield while closing distance. The gun discharged harmlessly into the ceiling as Jake applied a joint lock that separated weapon from shooter in one smooth motion. The third man at the door reached for his concealed pistol, but Jake had anticipated this. A thrown whiskey bottle, perfectly weighted, perfectly aimed, struck the man's gun hand, sending the weapon skittering across the floor. Before the man could react, Jake had closed the distance and applied a blood choke that rendered him unconscious in seconds. Three armed criminals. 25 seconds. 0 shots fired. 0 civilian casualties. As silence returned to O'Malley's, Jake stood among three unconscious men, showing no signs of exertion, no indication that anything unusual had occurred. The bar patrons slowly raised their heads, staring at their quiet bartender who had just performed what looked like a scene from an action movie. "Jesus Christ, Jake," whispered Tommy Chen, A regular who'd been coming to O'Malley's for 8 years. What the hell was that? Jake walked calmly back behind the bar and picked up his phone. 911, 3 armed robbery suspects at O'Malley's pub, 5th and Main. Suspects are secured and unconscious. Send paramedics. One has a head injury. He hung up and looked at the room full of stunned faces. Anyone hurt? He asked, as if he'd just broken up a minor disagreement instead of neutralizing 3 armed criminals. Manager Pat O'Malley emerged from behind the bar where he'd taken cover. Jake, he said slowly, how in God's name did you do that? Jake met his gaze directly. For 12 years, he'd avoided this moment. For 12 years, he'd successfully hidden from the skills that had once defined his entire existence. Navy SEALs, he said simply. Team 6, 8 deployments. Retired 12 years ago and came here because I wanted to serve drinks instead of other things. The words hung in the air like a revelation nobody had expected. Pat stared at him. You're telling me that for 12 years I've had a former Navy SEAL tending my bar, and I never knew it? That was the point, Jake replied. Police sirens were audible in the distance. The 3 criminals remained unconscious on the floor, their weapons secured behind the bar. None of the customers had been injured. The only damage was a bullet hole in the ceiling and some spilled beer. When Detective Maria Santos arrived with backup, she found something unprecedented. 3 armed robbery suspects professionally restrained, their weapons properly secured, and a bar full of witnesses who couldn't stop talking about their bartender's impossible response to the threat. Sir, Detective Santos said to Jake, I need to understand exactly what happened here. Your response to this situation was extraordinary. Jake handed her the 3 weapons, properly cleared and safe. 3 individuals entered with intent to commit armed robbery. I neutralized the immediate threat to civilian lives using minimum necessary force. Santos studied him carefully. That's military language. What's your background? Navy SEALs. Team 6, Counter-terrorism operations. I've been tending bar here for 12 years because I wanted a quiet job that didn't involve violence. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. As the criminals were loaded into ambulances and police cars, Jake cleaned up the broken glass and resumed his position behind the bar. The customers, still processing what they'd witnessed, gradually returned to their seats. Tommy Chen approached the bar slowly. Jake, he said, why bartending? Why hide what you can do? Jake poured Tommy his usual beer and set it down gently. Because everything I was trained to do in the military was about ending threats permanently. I wanted to learn how to serve people instead of serve my country in other ways. But the night's events had forced Jake to confront a truth he'd been avoiding for 12 years. The skills that made him lethal in combat were the same skills that had protected 23 innocent people from violence. Maybe there was a way to honor both identities. 3 weeks later, Jake made a decision that would change his life. He began working part-time as a security consultant for bars and restaurants throughout the city, teaching staff how to recognize threats and respond to dangerous situations without putting customers at risk. He kept his job at O'Malley's, but he no longer felt the need to completely hide from skills that, used properly, could protect people instead of eliminating them. The ghost of O'Malley's pub had revealed himself to be something far more substantial, a guardian who had found his purpose again, one drink at a time. So I ask you, have you ever encountered someone whose capabilities seemed to exceed their circumstances? Someone whose skills suggested backgrounds they preferred to keep hidden? Share their story in the comments, because sometimes the most dangerous people are the ones who choose to use their power to protect rather than destroy. If this story moved you, subscribe and help us honor the quiet protectors who carry specialized knowledge into civilian life. And remember, sometimes the most ordinary-looking people are capable of the most extraordinary things when the people they care about are threatened.